Alright, Common Core Algebra 2. Here we are for part 2 of 4.2. This is going to be our last flipped lesson on graphing quadratics. And this time we're going to talk about intercept form. So we did standard form first, then we did vertex form, and now we're going to talk about intercept form, which is nice because it makes it very easy to find the x-intercepts. Then we're going to do a little bit of work to find our vertex, and as always, to find our y-intercept is going to be 0. Plug that in and figure out what your y value is. Now, to introduce our intercept form, we have f of x equals a times x minus p times x minus q. And that a, that p, and that q are just going to be some numbers. In fact, a, remember, tells us if we open up or down by its sign. P and q are actually going to be the intercepts. So we can look at this, and without actually even doing any manipulation, we can identify the intercepts just by saying p0 and q0. Now, it's also really important that you notice here our signs change. If it's x minus p, then p is a positive number. If this was x plus p, then p would be a negative value. So it's really important that we understand our signs change there. They're always going to be the opposite when we talk about intercept form. Okay, to find the x-intercepts in this example, then, we take x minus 3, and that tells me it's going to be the opposite. 3, 0 is my x-intercept. And the second x-intercept, x plus 4, is going to be negative 4, 0. So in this case, we have two intercepts, which is most often going to be the case. We're usually going to have two intercepts. The only time we would have one intercept if it was the same identical thing twice, x minus 3 and x minus 3. And in that case, your x-intercept will actually also be your vertex. And a quick reminder here that value of 3 there tells us that we open up because this is a positive number. Okay, to find the vertex then, so that's the next thing we're going to look at. And remember, as always, we need to find an x and a y coordinate for our vertex. To find our x coordinate, we're going to start by taking our p plus q and dividing that by 2. It's important again to remember that there's like an imaginary set of parentheses here. So we need to start by saying p plus q, figure out what that value is, and then we divide by 2. That gives us our x coordinate. And like we've done previous times, to find the y coordinate, we're just going to plug in your x from that previous step, and then as always we need to simplify to figure out what our y coordinate is, and that'll give us then our point x, y, which is going to be the vertex again, which is the highest or lowest point. In our example here then, I'm going to take my p plus my q, 3 and negative 4, and divide them by 2, and that is going to give me a negative 0.5. Okay, so I'm going to plug that in. I get a negative 0.5 minus 3 and a negative 0.5 plus 4, which, and here I just have negative 0.5 in for x. So if I simplify that a little bit inside my parentheses, f of negative 0.5 equals 3. In here, negative 0.5 and negative 3 simplify to negative 3.5. Negative 0.5 and 4 simplify to 3.5. And if I multiply these three numbers out, I get negative 36.75. So the vertex then would be negative 0.5 and negative 36.75. Now those are kind of wonky coordinates for a vertex, but again we just have to approximate. A negative 0.5 in between 0 and negative 1, and negative 36.75 is getting pretty close to negative 37. I probably wouldn't give you that one that big to actually graph, just because it's hard to graph something that far off on a piece of paper. But it doesn't mean that I couldn't give you a question just to find those values. Okay, so that was our vertex. We did our x-intercepts and our vertex, and now to find our y-intercept, remember it always means make x 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 here. I have 3 and then 0 minus 3 and 0 plus 4, which is going to end up with 3 times negative 3 times 4. And if I get that, I get y is negative 36. So that means the y-intercept for this problem would be 0 and negative 36. Okay, and that is it for your last lesson on graphing quadratics. We found our x-intercepts. Remember, they're p and q. We found our vertex by doing p plus q divided by 2 and then plugging that value back in to get the y. And your y-intercept, as always, is just 0 in for x and simplify for y. Okay, we'll see you guys next time.